Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Father-Son Packers podcast, your source for Packers news, notes, and analysis. My name is Tommy, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, my dad, Matt. Dad, how are you doing?
Doing all right. Feeling a little better than I did, say, Friday night when I couldn't sleep.
Yeah, Friday night was definitely a night that, that was not great for most Packers fans around the country, as we all kind of doom-scrolled Twitter for about probably 4 hours, and then laid awake at night staring at the ceiling for another 2, and then woke up early at 6 in the morning refreshing Twitter. At least I'm describing my Friday to Saturday morning. But yeah, so we are here today to break down the Packers-Eagles game, and also to talk a little bit about going forward a little bit. Well, Dad, should we just get into it? Nothing really much else to talk about, right?
Might as well jump in. We're here on a Sunday night after
Sunday Night Football. I just watched the Lions beat the Rams in overtime. Quite a game. Packers-Eagles was maybe just as entertaining a game, but not nearly as well of a well-played football game. Packers lose 34-29, unfortunately falling to 0-1. And, really secondary to the fact that on the third to last play of the game, Jordan Love went down injured on what was really a meaningless play, which really just, makes it hurt even more. Could have been worse, it turns out. So we heard reporting on Saturday that it is a sprained MCL. So it could have been a lot worse. But
grade 1, between grade 1 and grade 2.
Yeah, which we learned today. But obviously, it still sucks. But 3 to 6 weeks is a lot better than the alternative we were all, anxiously, scared of on Friday night. But 3 to 6 weeks. We've heard multiple reports going each way, where Jay Glazer of NFL Network said that the Packers intend to start Malik Willis next week. And Diana Rossini of The Athletic reported that they have actually reached out to Ryan Tannehill, veteran free agent quarterback who's not on the team right now. But nothing actually in the works, but that they have reached out to him. So keep an eye on that going forward this week. We'll keep you updated on Twitter at FatherSonPacker. We'll be tweeting out throughout this, what the Packers moves at quarterback are. We always tweet out whenever there are roster moves, injuries. We tweet out whenever there are new episodes out. So give us a follow there at FatherSonPacker on Twitter. But yeah, Dad, this obviously sucked. It turned out better than it could have been, but it still sucks, that it was on such a meaningless play as well.
That is the kind of the cherry on top of that whole, Sunday.
Yeah.
When the play was almost irrelevant.
Have you seen all the people comparing the parallels between this game and the international game that the Packers played against the Giants 2 years ago, where also on a Hail Mary at the end of the game, our quarterback at that time, Rodgers with his thumb, this time Love with his MCL rather. Both international, both on plays that were pretty much meaningless to save a game that they probably should have won anyway.
Both 100-yard games for Saquon.
Yes, both games where Saquon came and just torched us. But yeah, so obviously we'll be keeping an eye on Love's injury. We'll be talking about that this week. I guess there is some optimism he could be back. I would guess like somewhere in that. I mean, they said 3 to 6 weeks. Someone else said, I think Glazer said 2 to 4. Yeah, but we'll see. We're just not going to know until we know.
We don't know. See. There are reports out in the Twitterverse that the Packers are hoping that it'll be in the early side of that time window, but who knows?
Yeah,
right now.
And MCL sprains can be prone to re-injury as well, so they obviously need to be wary of that as well. But at least we're thankful that it is not a season-ending injury, which I think there was some fear of at the time, and that hopefully we can weather the storm as we go through these next few weeks, and hopefully it's not too long. And we'll just keep an eye on it going forward, and we'll just be talking about Packers football going forward.
Right, and we'll just be watching the development of the other players, see how the defense progresses, see how the skill players and the offensive line come together.
Yeah,
we'll see how that goes.
Speaking of that, Dad, I guess let's just get into our breakdown overall. Not really anything else in the injury update, though. Josh Myers did not play the last 2 snaps of the game, but he did say, I think told Matt Schneidman after the game that he had cramps, that he's feeling all right now. So that's at least some good news there. And I don't think I saw any other players leave the game, except for maybe Eric Stokes. I think that's going to be one to keep an eye on, because Carrington Valentine, I had missed this, but he played 4 or 5 snaps at the end, and Stokes did not play every snap of the game. So that's, I think it's just one to keep an eye on. I haven't actually seen any reporting on that, but I was just curious to see Stokes did not play every snap and Valentine played a few. So there's something there. But Dad, should we just get into our full game breakdown? Go offense, then defense, then wrap things up with special teams as we like to do.
Oh yeah, there's a tortilla to put around that.
Very special teams. Special teams, special players, special plays, or reverse that. But anyway, so game breakdown. Let's just start it off here. Biggest moment of the game, Dad. We go by ESPN win probability added. So this is just, straight up which one swung the win probability the most. And that was the big 67-yard touchdown to A.J. Brown at the start of the second half for the Eagles. That took the win probability from a 50.4% chance of the Eagles winning to a 68.1% chance, which is a 17.7% swing. And it felt like a really big play in the game, Dad, don't you think?
And thanks, A.J. Brown, for having your fastest on-field speed
Since
against
his
us
rookie year.
your rookie year.
Yeah,
Thanks,
course.
we appreciate it.
Yeah, Jair gets beat on that play, and he's just off to the races. And I was kind of surprised that he pulled away from Jair that easily. But
I did not realize he had ever been that fast.
Oh yeah, I mean he's fast when he gets moving because he's so much mass moving forward. But yeah, when he's getting up to top speed, he's quite hard to stop. But so that was the play of the game, most impactful play of the game. Let's move on though to the offensive side of the football, Dad. We each had one or two things good, one or two things bad, but we'll talk about them all. But let's first start with what the Packers themselves are saying. Let's start that with from Matt LaFleur's postgame presser. He was mad, wouldn't you say? He was not happy.
You could see it when watching the presser how angry he was. He was talking about pissed. That game. He was not happy.
Yeah, the quote I found there from the offense that I thought was most interesting was, quote, "To come away with 9 points off 3 turnovers, that's not good enough," end quote. Matt LaFleur postgame presser. Yeah, it's not. And, do you want to start with the bad on offense? Or let's start with the bad on offense so we can end with the good, and we'll go bad, good on defense as well. Or do you want to do like a good sandwich where we put the in the middle? I mean, it's up to you. We could do either.
Let's start with the bad.
Okay, let's start with the bad. I think for me, I have a few here, obviously, because the offense was, the offense, when you actually look at the numbers on the whole, like, I think it's like 7+ yards per play.
Yes, I have that in there, that they actually had like 7.1 compared to the Eagles, much more than the Eagles, who had only 5.5 yards per play.
Yeah, when you look, it's like more yards per play. They scored 29 points. It feels like when you look at it, like at the end of the box score, it's like, oh, Jordan Love threw for like 270 yards. Like, it's like, okay, like you look at it and you're like, oh, it's like a pretty decent offensive day. But like actually watching it, I mean, they could have scored like 45 points in this game and probably should have. Because the first thing I think that was the problem in this game, which was not just the offense, was the defense as well, but I think the offense was more of the culprit, and that was penalties. It was a really, really sloppy game for Green Bay. They had, I think, either 14 or 15 penalties. So when you actually look at the box score, it will tell you 10, but that does not include like penalties where there were offsetting penalties. So the 12 men on the field for each team, which took a touchdown off the board. If the Packers had been buttoned up and had 11 on the field, they would have had a touchdown there. So it actually doesn't count that one, which I feel like you probably should count.
It took points off the board.
Exactly. And then it doesn't count like, other offsetting or decline penalties, but you're still committing those penalties. So to me, they still count. But they had 7 on offense over the course of the game. Rasheed Walker and Tucker Kraft had 2 each. I thought the game plan on offense was really good, but the execution was just really poor. And Matt LaFleur mentioned, 9 points off of 3 turnovers. The 2 early in the game where they had back-to-back, they turned the Eagles over back-to-back times and then had, 6. So they went 5 plays, 6 yards, field goal after getting a pick and having the ball in the Philadelphia 19. And the main reason there is because they had a holding on second down that made it 2nd and 20, which completely derailed that drive. And then the next time they had a turnover, which was kind of a gift from the Eagles on that fumble, it was 8 plays, 8 yards, field goal. And they had the ball starting on the Philadelphia 13. And the reason there was, they had a penalty. They made it 1st and 20, which they actually overcame. And then they only to commit OPI, which was, a bit of a questionable call, but only to commit OPI and then 1st and goal from the 13. And then they couldn't get it done because that's a little bit tougher. So penalties just completely derailed those drives. It was part of the reason they only had 6 points off those first 2 turnovers. And it felt really similar to the Niners game where it's just like, okay, when you don't capitalize early, like you're going to get bitten.
You just have this bad vibe from the beginning. After that, when you've made big plays, you've got opportunities deep in Philadelphia territory starting your drive, and both times you don't convert for a touchdown.
Yeah, and it felt very similar to the Niners game, where it's just like, oh, short yardage. Except that was more like, oh, we can't get it done in short yardage, and this is more penalties, just shooting ourselves in the foot,
getting behind the down and distance because of penalties. On both drives.
Yeah, it was a really, really rough one for the offense. Dad, what were you having as a negative for the offense besides the penalties and not capitalizing on those turnovers though?
So the first thing I had was like the run game in the first quarter. So how the run game started. Their EPA per play, rush EPA per play was negative 0.366, which would be great if you're a defense. However, on offense, it was 20th out of like the 26 teams that had played so far this weekend, and their 14.3% success rate was 23rd out of the 26 teams that had already played and have the data in there. On their first possession, they only had 4 yards on 6 carries in their first 3 possessions in the first quarter.
That's pretty bad.
Yeah,
not great.
so that was just a killer. So that includes their their starting possession, and the 2 possessions after the turnovers, where the run game couldn't get anything done at all. And the run blocking just looked really bad for those first 3 possessions.
Do you want a number on the run blocking? To put it, for the whole game, the run blocking was actually really bad. They got the run game going a bit in the second half, but at the same time, this number's from NFL Pro. They were stuffed in the backfield or at the line of scrimmage on 28.6% of their runs. So close to 1 in 3, like between 1 in 3 and 1 in 4 of their runs, they were getting hit in the backfield every single time practically. And that actually would have been worst in the league last year, dead last, 32nd. So, in terms of run blocking and getting clean lanes for the backs, really tough. Josh Jacobs looked rough in the beginning of this game, but he showed in the second half that when things are actually blocked up for him and he can get to the second level, he can still create explosive plays. And he made people miss a couple times in the backfield. And so I think, in some senses, that is a positive that Josh Jacobs did not look as bad as he did last year for the Raiders, in my opinion, despite the numbers probably being kind of similar.
Well, we could talk about that. Well, unless you have some more, I don't know if you want to transition to the better stuff, or you have some more.
I had a couple more negatives on offense, but I mostly covered all of them. And that was the penalties, the run blocking, and the lack of capitalization on turnovers. I will say also, just if we're pointing out individuals, Rasheed Walker had a bit of a rough day. 4 pressures allowed and 2 penalties is pretty bad. That's not a great day at left tackle for him. Hopefully he can put it together next week. The Eagles defensive line is tough, but it's still not a great day at the office for Rasheed Walker in this one. But Dad, anything else negative, or should we talk about positives? Because like I was saying, we were kind of transitioning there. I thought Josh Jacobs actually looked quite good in the second half, and you could explain away some of the first half struggles with okay, that wasn't really his fault. That was more, obviously you'd like to see him have more juice through the line. And at times I thought he wasn't bursting off of the, getting the ball initially. But at the same time, still not a great day for the running game, but not a bad day for Josh Jacobs individually.
I think it turned around, and I'll talk about it a little bit later, how it went as the game went on in the running game, because it definitely was an improvement. But if you want to get into some of the good things.
Yeah, go ahead. What's a positive for you on the offense side? Because they did still score 29 points. They still had over 7 yards of play. On the whole, the numbers are not bad. It's just felt worse at the time.
Yeah. So the run game got off this terrible start, which, combined with the penalties, kind of torpedoed their ability to convert on those 2 turnovers. But in the last 3 quarters, the run game had a rush success of 58.8%. This is all per RBSDM, which was 3rd best in the week so far in the last 3 quarters of the game, and the rush EPA per play of 0.5, which is the best in the league in week 1 so far.
And I was actually surprised. I'm not terribly surprised to see that the EPA per play is solid for the Packers, because they did have, Jacobs had a couple of explosive runs there. I was surprised to see that the success rate was actually quite good. Even if you include the first quarter, it's actually not bad. Yeah. And that the down-to-down running was actually probably better than it felt, even though at the time it was okay, we're getting stuffed short again. Okay, we're getting hit in the backfield again. Okay, it's 2nd and 11 again.
Yeah, and I should say that both those numbers, the success rate and the EPA per play in the last 3 quarters, were good enough that they would have led the league last year in both of those metrics. And for the running backs, Jacobs and Wilson both ended up with 2 runs of 10-plus yards, so 2 explosive runs, and Reed had 1 explosive run as well. And Jacobs had 68 yards on his last 7 carries.
Yeah, he once he kind of had space to work with, he actually looked pretty good. And that was another thing you mentioned, explosive plays. That was actually my positive, was they had some pretty good explosive pass plays. They had 4 different ones, which would have been tied for the 6th most in a game last year for Green Bay. Although, explosive pass rate would have been more like 9th, because they, ran a ton of plays in this game. There was just a ton of offensive plays for the Packers. But Jaden Reed specifically was very good in this game. But yeah, that 4 explosive plays, they were hitting strikes down the field pretty well. So there was at least that, but they did, it's funny because the numbers are actually really good. And then, but watching the game, it felt like, man, I feel like we're hitting an explosive play or we're getting nothing at the time. But actually the success rate's not bad. The main thing you'd say is Jordan Love's completion percentage wasn't great. There were some drops. He was throwing the ball deep downfield too. I think his average depth of target was 10 yards. So that's part of it with the completion percentage. Obviously, you'd like to see him like complete a few more. He definitely had a few misses there, but he also had some really wow throws. And I'm excited to watch him again. Hopefully, when he's back healthy.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of those misses was the footing. He'd be slipping while he's trying to make a throw. The traction.
Yeah, and I don't want to get into excuse making, but like the footing was not. He was slipping on a lot of those, but there were also some throws he made where it's like you shouldn't have thrown that. But like the pick, you shouldn't have thrown that. I did see some people on Twitter like saying like, "Oh, Musgrave needs to break that off." It's like, well, I mean, it's just you're kind of forcing that, and you don't really need to. But
yeah, it was like into double coverage. There was no chance really it seemed to complete that. That was not a good choice at that time. And then he had others where he's like, oh man, he just was off target on that one.
Yeah, but then some other plays where it's just like, holy crap, what a throw! Like, both the throws to Jaden Reed were fantastic.
Yes, and including that last one and
the drive where they were trying to desperation move it down the field. Yeah,
but overall, the other thing I had for a positive was the yards after catch per reception at 7.9. Last year for the season, they averaged 5.3, and they only had 2 games all year that were better than the 7.9 last year. The best for a season average last year was San Francisco at 6.4. So it seemed like, and there were 3 different players who were above 13 yards after catch per reception. So it wasn't just like one big play. There were 3 different players who did well in this. So it seemed like the play design was setting up opportunities to get yards after the catch for several of the players. So I think that was something to. So I think when you look at a lot of the numbers, like a lot of stuff. They were doing well.
They were doing a lot of good stuff. They just would shoot themselves in the foot after like 3 good plays and bang, shoot themselves in the foot, up, drive killed, like kick a field goal. And like do a couple plays, move back 10 yards, move forward 15 yards, back up 5 yards. It was just, it was one of those games. But Dad, let's wrap up the offense here with some things that made us think. What are some things where you don't really have an opinion on them, but they were just kind of, you're keeping an eye on them going forward?
Yeah. So I was watching a little bit of Jordan Morgan snaps, and he mostly looked good out there, both his run blocking and some like plays that didn't count because of a penalty. Still had good run blocking, but that wouldn't have contributed to his. I think overall all great. But what I thought was kind of strange is he outgraded Sean Ryan in run blocking, but Ryan outgraded him in pass blocking,
which is kind of the opposite of what you
might expect.
Yeah, Morgan, he got pushed back really bad by Jalen Carter one time, but I think for the most part, and like that's going to happen. Jalen Carter's a very good player. And he's in his first career game, no preseason games, no reps at all.
I remember we commented that was that his first snap in the game, and there's no double team. He's just one-on-one against Jalen Carter. I remember we commented that.
They were double teaming some guy I've never heard of, and then Jalen Carter was one-on-one with Jordan Morgan. I was like, why is this the protection we have drawn up? But anyway, I thought Jordan Morgan looked pretty good. I would not be surprised to see us transition to using him more.
Yeah. And speaking of other comments we made during the game, I remember Emmanuel Wilson looks good.
Yeah, Emmanuel Wilson had a really good game. I remember being like, okay, like because at this point in the game, it was like Jacobs was really struggling. It was like, should we just run Emmanuel Wilson for the rest of the game? Because Jacobs was at like 6 carries, 11 yards, and Wilson came in at like 4 carries, 46 yards. But it was mostly just Wilson's were like blocked up a lot better than Jacobs's were. But Wilson, not to take anything away from him, Wilson looked really good.
Yeah, Wilson looks very capable back. I feel comfortable when he's in there.
Yeah, he is a capable runner. Obviously needs to work on the pass protection a little bit, but I wouldn't say it like stood out as a major negative in this game. But not that they asked him to do it very much. But for me, the thing that made me think in this game was the tight end snaps. There's a new tight end 1 in Green Bay for sure. It's Tucker Kraft. In terms of snaps, Tucker Kraft had 64. Luke Musgrave had only 17. And then Tucker Kraft ran 28 routes to Musgrave's 8.
Yeah.
So, and then Ben Sims had 1 snap. So I was surprised not only by the fact that Kraft outsnapped Musgrave by that much, because even if like someone who, myself, I think Kraft is a better player than Musgrave, I would have thought it would have been like a 60-40 split. This was pure domination of snaps from Kraft's point of view. And the fact that they just didn't seem to run many 2 tight end sets in general.
You can just look at these numbers and they didn't have very many 2 tight end sets, which was a little surprising.
Which I think maybe is a point of emphasis in getting Jaden Reed on the field, because they don't really play Reed outside of the slot very much. And if you're running 12 personnel, which is 1 back and 2 tight ends, you're not going to have a slot receiver. So maybe it's like, okay, we like Kraft more than Musgrave and we like Reed more than Musgrave. And so we're going to run a lot more 11 personnel than we are 12 personnel. So Musgrave's just not going to get many snaps, which is, maybe not exactly what we expected, but it's definitely something I'm keeping my eye on, because Kraft was good in this game. He only had 3 targets and a couple of catches, but he looked good when he got the ball.
Yeah, the catch he had on the left side, it was very nice in the run after catch, which is where he I think separates himself from Musgrave the most.
Yeah, and the Packers, like we talked about previously, don't have a lot of those on the team. Like Jaden Reed is obviously one, but besides that, it's Kraft. Watson's got speed, but he's not going to make anyone miss. Dobbs is okay at that. Wicks is good at that, but he struggled in this game. He had a drop and then no yards on 3 targets. So, but yeah, so that's kind of the offense, Dad. Anything else that you wanted to touch on there, or should we move over to the defensive side of the football?
We can move on.
Okay, defensive side of the football. Let's start off with what they're saying. These are also some quotes from Matt LaFleur's very angry presser. So first, a positive quote: "To force 3 takeaways against a really good offense, I feel like you should win the game." End quote. So that's Matt LaFleur afterwards. So he was obviously saying hey, we did force 3 turnovers. Like that should be enough. Your +2 on the ball was, I think, another phrase he said. Like 90% of the time, you should win that game. But then he did go on to say, quote, "And do I think we need to play better defensively? Absolutely. We can't give up 30 some odd points a game. That's usually a recipe for disaster." End quote. So that's kind of my opinion as well. They did have those 3 turnovers, but we gave up 34 points.
When there wasn't a turnover,
it was a touchdown and a long drive.
And the first punt, I think they had 1 punt the whole game.
So let's talk about that a little bit. So after the first 2 drives where they first forced 2 turnovers, the Eagles went on to have 9 drives. 6 of those 9 drives went over 50 yards. And then a 7th one was a 24-yard drive for a touchdown. They forced 2 punts there. So in 9 drives after those first 2 turnovers, they had, I would say, you could say in one of those 50-plus yard drives, they did get that Jair pick at the end. So, they came up there. But pretty much every single other drive, they're letting the Eagles just walk the ball down the field, which was emphasized by the fact that at the end of the game, the Eagles get the ball back with 7:52 left, and the Packers pretty much don't see the ball again.
It was like the worst possible scenario.
You just get walked down.
You give up a score, and all the clock is eaten up.
Exactly, and this felt like something where it's like, wasn't the point of moving from Barry to Halfley was to be more aggressive, so you didn't just get walked down at the end of games, and to just have the clock bled out on you for 8 straight minutes practically is just really disheartening from the defense. Obviously there were some good things. They forced turnovers. One of those was the fumble was kind of a gift, but the others were really nice plays from McKinney and Jair. But yeah, Dad, let's start with the negatives though, so we can at least end positively. In terms of the negatives, obviously those last few drives, really, they're frustrating. When you look at the overall per drive at the end, so over those last 9 drives that I mentioned, the average drive for them was 8 plays, 46 yards. Like I talked about, 6 of 9 went for over 50, so that explains why the average would be so long. But they were just letting them just long, drawn out drives. And the defensive line was really disappointing in this game, Dad. Wouldn't you say?
Oh yeah, and I was looking particularly at the pass rush off the edge. I mean, they only had
what pass rush off the edge? There was practically nothing there.
They only had 5 pressures, including 1 sack by Gary, which was on a play where the right tackle thought the play was dead.
Yeah,
so that was out of 39 dropbacks.
And to be fair,
had very little impact on the play at all for most plays. And what it seemed like the coverage must have been good.
Yes. So okay, I have some numbers here. The coverage. So the D-line was really disappointing to me. Now, you mentioned the edge pressure was not great. I agree, but, at the same time, the Eagles' strength on the offensive line are their tackles, with Mailata on the left and Lane Johnson on the right. Both
tackles are good, but also, and one of their guards is really good as well.
And one of their guards is very good, Landon Dickerson. But their center and their right guard coming into this game were Cam Jurgens and Mekhi Becton, who were playing positions they did not play last year. And you would have hoped that guys like Kenny Clark, TJ Slayton, Devontae Wyatt, Carl Brooks would have been able to win those matchups. But when you look at the defensive line, the Packers, so these numbers are per NFL Pro, the Packers 2.89 seconds to pressure would have ranked 31st in the league last year. And Jalen Hurts' 3.07 seconds to throw would have ranked 31st in the league last year as well. And this is a quote from Matt LaFleur, just to hammer it home. Quote, "I just expected more from our pass rush tonight," end quote. They just weren't getting there. And I don't know if this was a schematic thing where they were so afraid of Hurts breaking the pocket and beating them with their legs that they were trying to not drive upfield as much, which, to be fair, they did a good job limiting him. He only ended up having, what was it in the end? 33 yards on 13 carries with a long of 8. When you compare that to 157 on 17 carries just 2 years ago, that's fantastic. But at the same time, you can't just let him sit back there and burp the baby. It was just for 3.5 seconds every single play. They just could not get off the blocks.
And that's kind of, it was that kind of pressure, which also led to, in part, than being able to just bleed the clock out at the end because they have all day back there. There's they don't have to have any urgency while they're back in the pocket.
Yeah.
So they don't have to be rushed or uncomfortable while they're trying to make a play.
And like I said, I want to leave it open to, okay, maybe you're trying to really make sure he doesn't scramble and make sure he beats you with his arm, which he did in this one. Shout out to Jalen Hurts. He had a pretty good game. He had a couple of throws that was like, okay, what's going on here? But he also had some really good throws. So, but you have to create pressure. Like at the NFL,
the NFL level,
you have to be able to rush with 4.
And no secondary can guard receivers in the NFL forever.
Yeah, and so they had a couple of coverage pressures, but like the numbers showed, the time to pressure was so late. Hurts was able to hold the ball so long, and they just weren't they weren't winning one-on-one matchups at all. And on places where they should have advantages, like Kenny Clark should have been able to dominate Jurgens and Becton. Like Devontae Wyatt should have been able to dominate Jurgens and Becton. And that was that was disappointing to not see a really good game there. And I think Kenny still had 4 pressures, but it just wasn't a very impactful 4 pressures, a lot of late in the down stuff. So, but yeah, that was the main negative for me, was just the D-line play and, just getting walked down at the end of the game. And the tackling in the fourth quarter I thought was not great either. But Dad, what did you have as negatives on the defensive side of the football besides that?
So I already mentioned the pass rush off the edge, but the other thing is, so Jair had a rough game.
Yeah, and no.
He gave up 4 catches on 6 targets.
Yeah, it's such a tough assignment too, though. Yeah. To be fair, man coverage on AJ Brown is a tough assignment, but yeah, no, he had some good reps, but when you targeted 6 times and give up 4 catches for 100,
he did have a very nice play where he read the play.
The pick was fantastic. It was a fantastic play.
He could see where the ball was going before the throw was made.
Yeah,
he recognized, this is where it's going. So that was a fantastic play. I got to give him props for that. That was a great play, but his overall passer rating against was 109.7.
Yeah. Whenever you're targeted 6 times, 4 catches for one of those being a massive 70-yard touchdown, right, so that's never ideal.
So that one play probably drove most of those numbers.
I mean, that one play swung the game, so that's kind of fair in some ways. It was a big turning point in the game coming out of halftime. You have the lead, and then you're playing catch up the rest of the game. Anything else, besides that?
Slayton had a rough game. Kenny Barry had a rough game. Some of it was run defense, but also the pass rush.
Yeah, I actually thought the run defense was not bad, except for at the end. At the end, they let Saquon get some really bad explosives that they really needed stops on.
Yeah, and that was because I have all the notes on the run game. Otherwise, was actually overall grades pretty well.
Yeah,
for the game on the whole, but
just there at the end, they just couldn't keep it up.
Just once again, we've had feels like we've had so many of these the last few years where when you need to get a stop at the end of the game,
couldn't do it.
Doesn't happen,
and that was the main reason to move on from Barry. So that's why it's a bit disappointing. Obviously, though, it is just 1 week. And
as I said before, going into the games, week 1 is often weird.
Yeah, week 1 is weird. In a different country, off of a 10-hour flight. But we're going to see what this defense has, next few weeks, because they're going to need to step up versus the Colts and the Titans over the next 2 weeks. But let's
let's hope that Will Levis.
Well, we're getting Richardson next week. So.
Richardson next week, but we'll get Levis the week after that. Gives us some gifts.
Hopefully he plays like he did today as well. But we'll see. He played well in the first half and then kind of fell apart in the second. But Dad, let's end with some good things on defense. Anything you wanted to touch on?
So my first thing is Edgerrin Cooper looked, I thought, overall really good. He had 3 tackles. He didn't play very much. He had 3 tackles and a batted ball in just 11 snaps. Led the team in PFF defensive grade at 85.9. And I was watching some of his plays, in addition to shooting up field and make a tackle with Saquon right near the line of scrimmage, which is kind of what you saw a lot from him, going downhill towards the line of scrimmage to try to make plays in the backfield or get sacks. But I also think he did a really nice job in a rep he had covering Calcaterra, the tight end, downfield. He's just stuck in his hip pocket the whole way, so the Hurts couldn't even look at him.
Yeah, and he only played, I think, 10 snaps, but he still had 2 run stops. He had a pass breakup on a blitz off the edge where, he came in, it was like a quick, one read from Hurts to the outside, and he just broke it up almost instantly. Had 3 tackles. it was a good day for Edgerrin Cooper. I hope we see more of him going forward because he was pretty electric out there. Speaking of young players playing well, I thought Javon Bullard had a nice day as well, specifically against the run. He led the team with 11 tackles rather and 2 stops. He was targeted 3 times for 3 receptions for 44 yards, so not the best day in coverage, but I just thought he brought a level of dynamism to the defense, a level of speed to the defense, level of force to the defense that had been lacking previously, and hopefully, he can build off of this and, have a nice rookie year. Other things good on defense, obviously forcing turnovers was good. Defending the QB run game, like we said, just 33 yards on 13 carries for Hurts. They really bottled him up a lot better than they did previously.
Yeah, so that was good. And their overall, the other thing is their overall run defense was good. So they were their 5th best in rush EPA per play on defense on the week so far. But that, I think, was mostly built on holding Hurts to a negative 7.6 rushing EPA for the game.
Yeah.
Well, Saquon was in the positive and had over 100 yards at 4.5 yards per carry. So a lot of it was built off of preventing the quarterback rushing success.
Yeah, and looking at the defense, is there a defensive player that you would say stood out for you? What did you think about? I guess we can talk about things that made us think. What did you think about the deployment of the players? Because let's start at the safety position. It was pretty much just McKinney and Bullard, which was a little bit surprising.
I have notes on that. What things that made me think
because Evan Williams, really great training camp, really good preseason game 1, held out of the other preseason games, doesn't play, or at least doesn't play in the 3rd preseason game. So is clearly highly thought of by the coaching staff, and then just doesn't play a snap in this game, which is a bit surprising given, how good he looked in the preseason and how it seemed that, the coaching staff was high on him, but didn't play a single defensive snap in this game.
Yeah, they basically decided it's only 2 safeties the entire game. So they never had 3 safeties on the field. So which basically meant that they didn't want to take Keyshawn out of the slot. So they never moved Bullard to the slot to get Evan Williams on the field.
Yeah.
And so they basically decided they wanted to have McKinney and Bullard in there all the time, and didn't want to get an extra safety on the field by moving one of them into the slot.
Yeah, and I actually thought I've been critical of Keyshawn's play before, and I wasn't in favor of giving him that contract extension the offseason. I really liked how he played and how he was used in this game, though. He was used probably with the highest level of versatility. Coming into this game, I was probably they're really going to switch up how they use McKinney and Bullard. They're going to bring McKinney down and blitz him. They're going to bring Bullard down and blitz him. And they did blitz Bullard once, but they were bringing Keyshawn off the edge. I think, whatchamacallit, I think I read somewhere it was Diary Carragher wrote about how they used, I think, almost as many defensive back blitzes in this game as they used all of last year almost. Just to circle back to Keyshawn, I thought he looked really good in the ways they were using him. They almost had him on a blitz. Keyshawn had a completely free release off a blitz, was just perfectly lined up Jalen Hurts, full sprint, was just going to probably pop the ball out, honestly. But coverage wasn't quite there, and they were able to complete it out just as Keyshawn was getting the hit on him. But so I really like the way Keyshawn was deployed in this game. I would just like to see a little bit of Evan Williams, though, just because I think, he seems like a good, he had a really good showing in the summer, and just getting some snaps in games like these would be good for his development, even if you want to say we really just like Bullard a little bit more, we like McKinney, obviously you're going to play McKinney, we like Keyshawn a little bit more, just getting some snaps for Williams, I think the ceiling is maybe higher there than it is for, the ceiling of a defense rather with McKinney and Williams at safety and Bullard in the slot might just be a little higher than, Bullard and McKinney and Nixon in the slot, even if I thought Nixon played pretty solid in this game. And I think Nixon's a solid player overall and, is probably better than Williams is right now. But I'm just talking about ceiling for the defense going forward. It would be nice to see Williams get some reps.
Yeah, and Nixon was credited just with one of their 2 sacks in the game as well.
That was not one of the blitzes. That was one where Hurts rolled out right, and he closed on him in the backfield. Yeah.
The other thing I just wanted to say about some of that is how I think McKinney looked good. The interception he made was a really nice play, and I thought overall he just looked really solid on the back end.
Yeah, McKinney looked good. I mean, that interception. When was the last time we saw a safety in Green Bay make a play like that? Right, because he was covering the opposite side of the field, And then, and shout out to Quay Walker for carrying, I think it was Devontae Smith up the field in Tampa too. Like, I don't think we've seen Quay Walker play defense like that, like play coverage like that before, rather. But he's carrying him up, and Hurts throws pretty much like the one you can't throw against that coverage. But shout out to McKinney for ranging over from the spot he is on the right side of the field and just, not only making a play on the ball, but turning the ball over there. Like, and that's something we have not had in the safety room in Green Bay for a long time.
Yeah, because we've had, not that many turnovers. Like last year, we were one of the worst teams in the league.
Second fewest interceptions in the league last year, ahead of only Tennessee.
So, turnovers make a huge difference. As LaFleur said, you're +2, and you should win 90% of the games.
Yep, but
we're
one of the 10%.
We're one of the 10%ers. 10%.
Cool, sick. Anything else that made you think in this game, though, Dad?
On offense or defense?
On the defensive side specifically, I think we hit offense already.
So I just thought it was interesting about how we talked about the safeties playing the whole game, but they had 4 different players play all 76 defensive snaps. Mm-hmm. McKinney, Bullard, Quay Walker, and Jair. And McDuffie played 74. He only missed 2. So they really concentrated the amount of play to a small number of players, and which is a little surprising that they didn't sub people out a little bit more. They did it on the defensive front more, and then as they went to nickel packages and got Eric Wilson off the field. But it was basically Quay and McDuffie as their 2 linebackers when they went with just 2. So that surprised me a little bit. I think I saw a snap or 2 in the second half with it was Walker and Cooper as the 2 linebackers in nickel, which I thought actually worked pretty well. So that surprised me a little bit, especially people cramping up and having difficulty. They didn't substitute more people in.
I'm not as surprised just because, most teams do just play their starting safeties.
Well, you see that with the safeties, but also we saw it with 2 of the linebackers.
Well, I'm not surprised one of the linebackers because Quay's got the green dot.
Yeah.
Because he's...
Yeah, I maybe was a little surprised that McDuffie played so many snaps.
Yeah. I'm not as surprised as you are, but I could see why you are surprised. I think going forward, maybe we see a little bit more Cooper there, hopefully.
Watching how Cooper played in this game, I think he's going to start taking some of those snaps.
Yeah, but obviously, at the same time, when your role is a little more defined and you have such a few number of snaps, and it's going to be pretty much like, hey, just get upfield and make a tackle. But it is a little easier for him.
But he also showed more ability in coverage than we've typically seen from McDuffie.
Yeah, although
we'll see how consistent that could be.
Exactly. It's and the thing with McDuffie is, like, some people were slamming him online for that wheel route to Saquon. That is so tough.
He had no chance.
That is so tough.
He was lined up in the middle.
Yeah.
And Saquon's going out wide. So if you go back and watch, you say,
Barkley, who's like way better athlete than him. Like, it's just, that's
if you see position. The end of the play, you see, it's McDuffie in coverage. He got beat. But he had to run halfway across the field just to get into that coverage. I'm not going to blame him for that play at all, because I was impressed he got as close as he did, considering how far he had to run before he even got in coverage.
Yeah, one thing that made me think on defense, just to add on one more thing, is this is also from Derek Harriger's piece on Packer Report. You should really check it out. He charted all of the defensive snaps by coverage. It's really good, and also is very informative. The one thing I found interesting was the Packers used stunts. So, a stunt or a twist is like either the edge coming around and the tackle coming down, or vice versa, on just 8% of snaps on Friday, which is about 5 times less often than they did last year. Last year, they were at 37%. On Friday, they were at only 8%. The question that he poses is whether or not perhaps, or either he posed or someone else posed, I can't remember, was, did they not want to run as many stunts and twists versus the Eagles specifically because they were worried about getting caught out of their gaps in the run game?
Open up run lanes for Hurts.
And I'm going to tell you now, that means you're not going to get an answer next week against the Colts, because it's going to be pretty much the same game plan, I would imagine, given the fact that Anthony Richardson is also a crazy threat with his legs. But so it's just something to keep an eye on. Is it going to be a little more vanilla up front in terms of stunts and twists? I hope not, because I would like to see more from the D-line going forward, but we'll see.
Yeah, and so that you're talking earlier about the game plan maybe influencing how much pressure they're getting, because they're trying to maybe maintain some gap integrity.
It feels like excuse making at the same time, though. Like, you need to get some pressure.
But we also wanted to see more of the defense players getting into the backfield this year.
Yeah, exactly.
And taking more chances.
And they didn't create as many, the whole talk in the offseason was, we're going to be more aggressive, we're going to one gap, we're going to penetrate, and we're going to create negative plays. They did not create, like they created the 3 turnovers, but other than that, almost the very few negative plays were created from the Packers defense in this game.
Right. There are 2 sacks and no other tackles for loss, I think.
I don't have those numbers in front of me, but maybe like 1 or 2, not very many. But anyway, Dad, anything else on the defense you want to touch on, or should we wrap up with special teams and then get on out of here?
Sure. I'm sure you have something.
I love special teams, but go ahead first.
So this is just a thought. Like, how do I feel about Keyshawn bringing the ball out of the end zone for the last possession? So before the play, I'm thinking to myself, I don't want to see somebody try to take it back here. We'll just lose time. And we ended up having 5 fewer seconds out of only 27. And he did get forward, but you need more than just a field goal.
Yeah.
So that's that makes a little difference. Like, oh, well, can he house one? Like, it finally happened today.
Yeah, that's the thing. Is like I was kind of torn because result wise, awful. You lose 5 seconds, and I think they got it to the 15 as opposed to the 30. So you're dead and buried. If you need a field goal, I think there's no way you should ever take it out of the end zone there. You probably still shouldn't, but I understand why Keyshawn would think he should, given that you need a touchdown. He's a very good returner. It's a new kickoff where you don't actually really know what the right thing to do all the time is. Like, you have the data from the XFL, but it's different for the NFL. So I think it's a forgivable mistake. And you could argue it's worth the risk at that point where it's, okay, you have like 28 seconds. You need a touchdown. Like, is it worth losing 15 yards there in 5 seconds to have a shot at a return touchdown? I think maybe it is. It'd be
interesting to actually run the probability there.
Yeah,
of getting a score by taking it out versus not.
We just don't have sufficient data yet in terms of the number of kickoffs.
I'm thinking about a lot of times for NFL in general is the sample sizes are always small.
Yeah, exactly. My thing for the special teams is kicker issues will continue until morale improves,
and you know what that means. The kicker issues are beatings.
Yes. That miss from 43. How did you feel when that happened? I still actually I'm fine with they should not make a move at kicker. If they make a move at kicker this week, I think that shows a level of panic that should not be happening.
I don't expect that.
Yeah, they should ride with Narvison for probably at least half the season. That 43-yard miss can't happen though. Like, you gotta
43 is short.
You gotta make a 43-yard. It looks so good off his foot too. Am I crazy? I would have called it. I was like, that's
I'm
going
watching
in.
And thinking it's like, I guess get closer, but maybe it's already through the uprights. Like, don't. Nope.
Yeah, it just faded so hard on him. It looked like he just didn't quite hit it hard enough to not have that super fade at the end.
That's the one thing I was thinking of. Did he just kind of let up and sort of try to guide it in because it was so short that he's okay, this short. I just got to make sure I hit it on line. It's like a golf swing. You let up on it, and it
just dies on you.
Just dies, yeah.
Yeah. At least he bounced back and made the next one, but they were all like 30, because he only made like 30 and 20 yards, right? They're all super short. So we'll just keep an eye on that. Hopefully, he bounces back next week. But Dad, let's wrap things up here with our player of the game. Who did you have? I think you copied me.
I did copy you because I didn't know who else I would pick besides Jaden Reed.
Yeah.
Jaden Reed was fantastic.
It's got to be Jaden Reed. Overall on the day, he was definitely the one making the most for the offense. He had a rushing and a receiving touchdown in the same quarter. I think I saw that him and Saquon each had rushing and receiving touchdowns in the first quarter, and that had been like the first time that had happened in maybe ever. But overall for the day, he has 1 carry for 33 yards and a touchdown, which is an awesome play. And then also has 4 catches on 6 targets for 138 yards and another touchdown. He was just an explosive play machine in this game. It was fantastic.
And breaking tackles.
Yeah, exactly. And
the only other player I thought about putting in here was Zach Tom. Actually had a
really
game.
Nice game. Really nice game for him.
Had a really good. He led the team in run blocking grade and gave up no pressures.
There's a reason you did not hear newly acquired pass rusher Bryce Huff's name for pretty much the whole game. That they were mostly dealing with interior pressure when they were dealing with pressure, and also from the left side, Walker with having a tough day. But just to wrap things up on Reed here, though, because I think we both agree, fantastic day for him. In an interview with Larry McCarron after the game, Matt LaFleur about Jaden Reed said this, quote, "We're going to have to find different ways to get him the football and probably needed to get it to him more tonight," end quote. That's fair. You got a lot of weapons to spread the ball around to. You don't want to leave anyone out in the cold, but Jaden Reed, at least in this game, was on fire.
Right. When you have a player who's looking like the best player on the field, you give him the ball more.
Yeah.
Regardless of whether you think the other guys are good. You give it to the guy who looks the best.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a really great day for Jaden Reed, though. But Dad, any last things that you want to touch on before we wrap up here, or should we call it and then move on to week 2? And,
we will be looking ahead to what happens and trying to just look at the whole team, and we'll see. Right now, we haven't heard anything more about them signing another quarterback. Maybe by the time you guys listen to this, you'll know more than we know now. But I'm going to be watching how the defense reacts and how the rest of the running game and the rest of the offense reacts.
Yeah. But yeah, so this has been our recap for the Packers-Eagles game. We'll be doing 2 episodes a week for the rest of the season, pre-games and post-games for every single game. Check us out on Twitter at FatherSonPacker. We tweet out whenever we have new episodes out, and any stats that we find when we're doing research for these episodes. We'll keep you up to date on, Jordan Love injury. Once again, it's a sprained MCL. They're reporting 3 to 6 weeks. Hopefully he's okay. Sucks obviously, but could have been worse. So at least there's that. But we'll be keeping you up to date. Keep an eye tuned on podcast feeds, whether that's, Apple, Google, Spotify. We are having trouble with YouTube right now. We're trying to figure it out. Apologies for those of you who listen to us on YouTube, but you're not hearing this anyways right now. So we're having trouble with our distributor, but
Somebody pass these apologies on to your friends who only use YouTube.
Yes, but we're working on it and we're going to try and figure it out. But anyway, thank you so much for listening. Keep an eye going forward. Packers playing the Colts next week. So, we'll be having a pregame coming out next week. So keep an eye out for that. And until then, go Pack, go.
Go Pack, go.